So, anyone else ever look at some of the new camera technology out there and just say, oh, that's scary? Yeah, me too. So, let's have a margarita. All right. I am going to make for you my prickly pear margarita. And because I goofed on my signature old-fashioned recipe, I know, I'll redo it, I promise. I'm going to read off of my notes. All right, so we're going to start off by chilling the coupe glass. This is going to be a fancy margarita, so we're not going to do a salt rim. And most of what we're going to do here is technique, by the way, but there are some good ingredients to use. So the thing that got me thinking about today's topic was reading a week and a half ago a press release and then an article about Canon's 410 megapixel full frame sensor, which is bonkers, right? That number is so hard to imagine. And it's not something that's apparently supposed to come out in cameras, thank goodness. I remember a couple of years ago reading a report about some cyber researchers who took, I think it was Angela Merkel's fingerprints off of a photo of her and were able to make fake fingerprints that could be read on a scanner from it. And that wasn't even a specifically special camera. So 410 megapixels, what that means is that each square millimeter, 1 millimeter square like that, has approximately the same resolution as a Super VGA monitor. For those of you who are too young to remember what a Super VGA monitor is, it's 800 pixels by 600 pixels. It was, back in the mid-90s, it was awesome. That was what you wanted. All right, so I'm going to start off here with the lime. What we're going to do is you want to cut the ends off of the lime, okay? This just helps you squeeze the juice out of it a little bit better with the juice press. We're going to have the lime, and I'm going to use the top half of the Boston shaker here to hold all of my ingredients until I pour them into the ice. Press and drip. This is going to seem a little bit weird. Let me move this stuff out of the way. I'm taking the pressed half of lime, and I'm putting both of those into, after they're pressed, into the other half of the Boston shaker. And they're going to get shaken around with the cocktail. And you want to do this because then you get a little bit of the pulp out of there as well. It gives you a little bit more lime flavor. You can zest the lime for garnish if you would really like to. I should have grabbed my zester. I would have if I had remembered to do that. Okay, Boston shaker, coupe glass. Next up, oh, I forgot the secret ingredient, straight up prickly pear jelly. This is, I bought this off of Etsy from Chasez Specialties. If you don't have prickly pear, it's kind of a specialty ingredient in the US. Even any kind of jelly with no fruit bits, so like a strained jelly, will work. Strawberry would work really well for this, so would potentially cherry. Anyway, so 410 megapixels, that's still kind of like, I think, a bit abstract to say that each square millimeter has approximately the same resolution as an SVGA monitor, okay? Big monitor. Another way to think about it would be how much could you zoom in on that? And in the press release, I think it was maybe also the petapixel thing, it said it was the equivalent of almost 200, I think the exact number is 198, 1080 monitors. So ridiculous. All right, so 200 1080 monitors, or 36 times 24 is 800 and something, 890, call it about 900 SVGA monitors. All right, so how much, oops, wrong side. All right, starting off with one ounce of silver tequila. I'm using Herradura silver. This is about as low end as you want to go for this drink. Trust me on that. You don't want to get cheap tequila because the rest of the ingredients here are pretty high end. That's why that's a small bottle, because that's not the cheapest tequila on the market. All right, 1 ounce of tequila in with the lime juice. Next up is 1 ounce of dry curacao. I'm using a yuzu dry curacao. This gives it a bit more of a tart flavor, which is going to be offset by the prickly pear. If you were to use a drambuie, you could do that as well. Drambuie tastes a bit sweeter to my palate, so you might want to use like a little bit more lime or a tartar jelly with it. Okay, 1 ounce of the the dry curacao. I've never tried this with blue curacao. It would, with this recipe, turn the whole drink purple, and that's not what we want. We want a very, very pink cocktail. And 1/2 ounce. Oh, good Lord. I just measured a 1/2 ounce for each of those. Let's try doing this correctly. So we need a full ounce of both the tequila and the dry curacao. I have an audience right now. My wife and Steinbeck are sitting on the couch watching me judgmentally as I make this, so I'm a bit distracted. It's all right. Just kidding. She's reading the news. Yeah, it's still good. Okay. Anyway, we're just going to literally take a 1/2 ounce. So it's 1 ounce tequila, 1 ounce dry curacao, 1/2 ounce of the prickly pear jelly. That's not quite a 1/2 ounce. That's getting finished off tonight. That is so good. Just going to plunk that right in there. Okay. What on earth would a 410 megapixel sensor be used for? Now, there are a couple of examples given in the article or the press release for industrial applications. And a really good one that I think is 100% accurate would be to connect a software, like a scanner, to reading circuit boards or other microchips. You could potentially, if you had a high enough resolution lens, use this for microchip scanning to make sure that everything looks good. Because you can, 410 megapixels, there is so much enlargement ability with that, it's unreal. And another thing that was mentioned was surveillance, not like security camera surveillance. I don't know if you've ever seen a news article about a bank robbery. There's no resolution coming from those security cameras. If you've never had prickly pear jelly or prickly pear candy, do yourself a favor if you can get some and pick some up. It is such a nice flavor. But I think there's probably another use for it in the surveillance field that would be more like satellites or aerial photography, things like that, that could be for very, very high resolution, high end photography of that nature. Dump the ice water into the pitcher filter. Going to put everything in here, and I'm going to come back after I finish shaking this because it's going to be a terrible noise. I'm awful at opening Boston shakers, just going to admit it. Almost. I've just not mastered the technique of smacking these things open. Okay. If this turned out well, we're going to have in this coupe glass a very lovely pink, slightly cloudy cocktail that's just going to taste like lime and sweetness. And that is pretty darn close to exactly what we want. There's a little bit of lime pulp in it, which is great. I happen to like that a lot, even though it is definitely clogging up my strainer here. But there's no ice chips. That's perfect. That's a nice mix right there. Okay. I worry a lot about how advanced some of that stuff can be, especially because the press release, I think it was, stated that this is a full frame sensor. It's going to be available on cameras that have an an RF mount, which means RF lenses could be used on it. In theory, if you could get your hands on one of these industrial cameras that could use this, that is not that is not a level of resolution I want just in anyone's hands. I don't want that level of resolution in not just not anyone's, you know. That doesn't make any sense. But basically, I don't think anyone, no organization, no entity, no person should have access to a sensor that can record 410 megapixels. I don't care that the video specs are only like 24 frames per second, or that, you know, you could, pixel bin in black and white for 100 megapixels, which honestly does sound very neat from a creative perspective. But, man, pixel binning black and white at 1/4 the resolution of a modern sensor would be amazing for any camera. But back to the 410 megapixel sensor, like that's not a level of technology that is safe for anyone to have. There are too many, like once you make something like that, like you don't get to put it back in the box. And we see this time and time again. I know I sound like an old curmudgeon right now, I really do. But we've seen this time and time again in my life for certain, and more often in the last handful of years, where instead of people saying, is this a responsible thing that we should unleash on the world, they just say, hey, let's unleash it on the world and see what happens. Everything, I'm sure, will be fine. So if this turned out well, it's going to have a sweet, fruity, prickly pear flavor to it that's going to have a nice lime sharpness, and it's going to be very cold from, obviously, the ice. That is definitely the best cocktail I've ever thought up. I wish I could make this for all of you guys. Holy cow. There is something about mixing the jelly in with the cocktail, like the straight up jelly, and it dissolves. And then the flavor of the prickly pear, which is like super sweet and fruity, with that lime sharpness. It's also like citrusy and sharp. There is something about that combination. And I think also the yuzu dry curacao adds this nice like dry tartness to it. I think with the Drambuie it would be maybe a bit too sweet, or any of the other orange liqueurs. Anyway, I know I sound like some crazy old geezer who's like, man, like the times they are changing too much. But there was a time when the technology did not change as fast as it does today. And for those of you who weren't here when that was the case, it used to be that the annual technology upgrade cycle in tech was considered very fast. Now it's just like every day something new is out there. 410 megapixel sensor, or a new AI model that can pass 10% now is the best that an AI model can do on humanity's last ever exam. I've read some of the questions on that, and I don't know a single person who could do that. And that's obviously why they had people from across all kinds of expertise develop that exam. But I know that, my whole life, the pace of technology has changed, and I think that's made market's not the right word. Has created an environment where change for change's sake has become the thing that companies do, that innovators in any market space do. They just create and ask, what can we do, without asking what would be the responsible thing to do. Could we make something that can record the details on a person's iris from, across a very, very large room? The irises of a person's eye from across a very large room. Is that a responsible thing to do? Well, no, obviously not. Could we create a camera that can, if you are waving at somebody from the gangplank of an airplane to somebody in the press corps, that they could figure out what your entire handprint looks like just from a single image. Is that a smart thing to do? Is that something we want in the world where people who would use that for ill can access it? This is like a very basic question that no tech company seems to be asking about anything. I think that if companies writ large ask themselves, like, is this something we want in the world? Cars would not have touchscreen displays the size of televisions in them. That's ridiculous to have. Anyway, and so I think that this whole 410 megapixel sensor is in and of itself a terrifying technological development because of what it could do. Beyond that, I think that the more terrifying thing is the mindset in industry that leads to the creation of a tool like this. Yeah, sure, it has legitimate uses for things like scanning the backs of microchips to make sure that they are built correctly, or other camera sensors, or other high-tech type things. And sure, it could be absolutely amazing. Give me one of those cameras and put it in a telescope on the dark side of the moon. Like, can you imagine the type of astrophotography we would get with sensors like that, and what it would do for our understanding of the universe? Those would be great uses for it. But I don't know, man. Sooner or later, like all technology, somebody who shouldn't have their hands on it gets their hands on it. And more now than ever, that stuff's happening sooner rather than later. So it's not meant to be a depressing episode, I promise. It's more of a trying to provoke thought about what is the nature of responsible technology and responsible innovation, and what do we actually need as a society to move forward. And if we don't need some of these technological advancements, who do they benefit? And if we can't answer that question, why are we making it? Anyway, have a good weekend, everybody, and I'll see you again in another Cameras and Cocktails.